Welcome to The Plant Report, a radio show that educates about the green world one plant at a time. The Plant Report is a new educational resource about plants, herbal medicine, ethnobotany, and the human-plant relationship. Listen to our podcast, read our blog, watch our videos, and learn from experts and the plants. The Plant Report is a project of Sustainable World Radio and is hosted by Jill Cloutier. Thanks for listening to The Plant Report because every plant has a story. Our plant today is lavender, and our guest is farmer, teacher, and writer Lori Parr. Lori lives and farms lavender off the grid on Rosalie Ranch in western Montana. Lori's also known as Lavender Lori, and you'll get to hear all about her favorite, I think, and one of my favorite plants. She's the editor of the Earth Nurture newsletter and author of the soon-to-be published book, Lavender Farming Secrets from a Hard Row Hoed. Welcome to the Plant Report, Lori.
Thanks, Jill. It's great to finally catch up with you.
I know we've been corresponding for many months now, and today we're going to be talking all about lavender and how to grow it, its uses, and why we both like it so much. Before we get started, though, I wanted you to share with listeners about what inspired you to grow lavender in the beginning. And I read on your website that you were struck by a lavender lightning bolt of inspiration, which I loved, at age 36. And You knew you wanted to grow this plant, but at the time you didn't have a farm, you had little money. What was it about lavender that drew you in and inspired you to become a lavender farmer?
Well, I had gone just on a fluke with a friend because we'd been looking at my garden at lavender plants growing there. And she said, we should just go over to the Squim Lavender Festival, which is over on the peninsula in Washington. And I had never even heard of such a thing. And I said, there's a lavender festival? And she said, yeah, let's go. So we went, and it was just amazing to me. I, at the time, was a landscape designer and consultant and a maintenance person in the landscaping trade, and always had lavender in my gardens. Wherever I designed a garden, it was sort of a signature plant. And so I loved it from the beginning. And then when I went to this festival with her and we're standing in line waiting to pay the farmer to harvest his field for him at the U-Pick. And we're sucking on a lavender sorbet ice cream cone. And we just had a mushroom lavender bisque for lunch. And I mean, it was like all six senses, like even that intuitive spiritual sense had been totally, just imbued with the infusion of lavender. And I really was I was taken aback. I was like, I looked at my friend, I just said, why isn't anybody doing this farming of lavender in Montana? And she said, because it's Montana. It's just not an easy place to grow things. But I knew it grew well and I knew its requirements. And I was like, well, that's crazy. I know it'll grow there. And it, I came back with I was obsessed.
You were immersed and then obsessed. It's great.
Yeah, I felt like I just wanted everyone in the whole world to feel what I felt that day at that festival. So it was sort of my like, I just had this driving, when you get hit with something like that, it's like everybody telling you it's never going to work just doesn't even come across your radar. It doesn't make any sense. You're just hell bent to do it. So I was.
And you actually pioneered the growing of a couple of species of lavender in your bioregion, which is very impressive. Because when I think of fields of lavender, I see like Provence and the Mediterranean and not really Western Montana. So what made you think, it sounds like what made you think you could grow it there is just the inspiration and excitement you felt being around that plant.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that I knew its basic requirements, which are sunshine, which we get plenty of in Montana summers, lots of sun, and heat, which we get really hot here in the summer. We can, typically 80s to 100 in the hot months. And that's when lavender is doing its thing, June, July, August, late June. So it was just, I don't know. It sort of felt like one of those things where, okay, this is just the right time. I think I could pull this off. And I did a whole bunch of research because that festival was in July. And then I went all winter long, of course, being a gardener, not a whole lot going on. So had time to do a whole bunch of research about farming lavender and about particular varieties. And then the one variety that I chose to base my entire crop on of 1,500 plants was one that all the catalogs, all of the research out there on lavender said only had a 50% chance of surviving. It's a whole other thing, though. It's like I have never been a 9-to-5er, Monday through Friday person in my life, and always been self-employed and just buck those systems left and right. And when you're a system bucker, you're a risk taker. I mean, it just comes with the, territory. So it was like 50%. I figured that's pretty good. I'll try it. That's good enough, and I, of course I was only 30 something and I just didn't have a lot of sense then, but
sometimes that comes in handy, right?
50% means, and a lot of farmers tell you, you got to go big or go home. And I thought, 1,000+ plants was big enough that if I lost a bunch, maybe I didn't even think of losing it though at that time. It just wasn't possible.
For people who are listening, I'm pretty sure that most listeners know about lavender as a plant, but do you know the Latin name of the plant, just so we all are on the same page?
Well, this particular variety I'm growing, you've got your Lavandin, which is the French varieties, and they're usually sterile. So they need to be produced with, propagated with cuttings, tissue cultures. And then the other one is Lavandula, which is the English varieties. One is a Lavandin cross. It naturally crossed in the wild in France back in the 60s, I believe, late 50s. It was found in a field where there were some French that may be fertile and English growing side by side in this area. And this gentleman by the last name of Grosso discovered it. And so this particular one is called Lavandin X Intermedia, so cross intermedia Grosso. It's a hybrid, which is one of the reasons why it needs to be grown from a clone.
And growing from a clone, is that the same as cuttings?
That is exactly what it is. And there's various ways of doing that. There's the layering, which is you're pulling from branching material that's close on the ground that may have developed roots. So you can cut that rooted branch and then try that, which I tried that in the beginning. And then a friend of mine showed me how she does, another local farmer here, how she does in the house with many little soft tip grown cuttings, off of her, what we call mother plants, where you see something that's really viable and you take cuttings from that. But yes, it's a tip cutting, but I have found, and now I have no setup in my off-grid situation where I would run a heated greenhouse. And lavender needs a little bit of heat and it needs humidity when you're starting it, which it continues to be a heat lover in its maturity, but it shuns moisture in most forms once it's mature. So it's like you can't have it humid forever. It's one of the main reasons people can't grow it is they water it too much.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that about lavender.
It's like the number one reason why people have trouble growing it. And I hear it from everybody, oh, I can't grow it. It just doesn't like me. I'm like, I bet you water it too much. You're loving it too much. But yeah, the cuttings, then I decided I didn't have a setup where I could plug in an electrical cable and suck all of my solar power away. And I didn't have the time nor the inclination to mist them 5 times a day so that they would be humid like they like it in their get-go. And I'm one of these definite tough love types. And I thought, well, how do they do it in France, in Bulgaria, and Croatia on these massive lavender farms? And they're literally field planting their clones. So I make room out in my field. I have the starter rows, and I just put them directly in the soil. I don't even use a root hormone or any special anything. It's all very timing sensitive as to when the humidity is highest and when the heat warms the soil enough that they'll root in.
Well, I'm going to go rescue my lavender cutting that's outside in a jar of water right after this interview.
If it's still alive, they have an amazing dynamism, I think, where they just appreciate being planted in the ground. And if it's still alive, you could definitely make a cutting off of it for sure.
It's not too late. Hang on, lavender plant. So what are some secrets for people? It sounds like you've already shared one with us about not too much moisture. What does lavender need to be really happy and thriving?
Okay, so for lavender to be its happiest, which is the ideal situation, so for long life of your plants, is it's got to have sunshine. And where the original farm was, that sun had come up over the mountain at 6 and it wouldn't go down until 9 o'clock in the night. So that is like 15 hours of sunlight, I think. Is that right? It's a long day. Can't have enough of that. It needs great circulation. Like wind, people are like, oh, it's too windy where I live. And I'm like, it cannot be too windy and it cannot be too sunny. What it is too wet. So it just has to have excellent drainage. So excellent drainage, lots of sun, and lots of, and I was convinced for years because of what I read, not what I had experienced. I'd always been farming in some really rich loam at the first farm, and it was fine. So here's an idea. I water lavender at that original farm in a rich loam. I'd water it maybe one time a month. So not until July, because June is usually wet when I'm doing my cuttings. April and June are pretty wet. May is usually warm and dry or in the middle there, but April and June are really wet, so I don't even put water on it until July. And then I'd water it one time a month, July, August, September, and October. So they go into winter with a good moist root system. But I mean, one time a month, and this is drip irrigation is the best idea for it. Flood irrigation could work if you really knew what you were doing and if you had the crowns planted up on a hill.
Well, I've learned so much already from talking with you. I think I'm torturing my lavender plant.
Yeah, and this is all hard-won experience, like on-hand experience. Like I am not a farmer. I was a gardener. I always had a garden, but I have never farmed a monocrop before. So this has all been like, whoa, what have I got myself into here? And you really can't know it. There was no book when I started. There's no how to do this in this particular area kind of book. And the coast is very different. Growing it over on the coast is much different than growing it in the Intermountain. So my book is kind of based more on what you can expect in the Intermountain. Basically, my book is telling people how to do it better than I did.
Oh, that's so. Your book, we'll talk more about your book later on, where people can find it too. So does lavender, since it doesn't love a lot of moisture, is mulching a good idea for this plant?
No, it hates it. Absolutely hates it. The best thing you can cover it with, and you don't cover it, nature does, is snow for those cold months. It's the best insulation. And, I'm trying to have people be as experimental over on the east side of the divide as I was here in Montana on the western side, by encouraging them, if it's going to get cold, which it does over there. They're a zone 4, and we're a zone 5, 5A, 5B. We're getting up there. And with the global warming, it's getting warmer every year, but yeah, so it's the best thing is to cover it with snow, even if you have to shovel it on top of it, just so it's covered. But it absolutely hates anything that creates humidity around the crown of the plant, and the crown is where it branches off once it emerges from its root from the soil. So it just hates to be, and you'll know it because it'll just not green up. It'll just turn to mold.
That's what mine looks like now. I have tons of straw around it. I thought I wasn't watering it enough, so I'm so glad I taught. You're doing a lavender intervention right now.
And you're in is this Santa Barbara?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, no, girl, open it up. Let it have some of that sunshine.
Oh, good. Okay, good to know. I thought I knew so much about plants. Oh my gosh.
What's your water situation over there? What's your annual rainfall?
Well, it used to be 18 inches, and
Oh,
now it's this year we've had one rainstorm.
oh my
It's
goodness.
terrible. It's changed a
Wow.
lot in the past 5 years.
And so technically, lavender in France, they don't allow irrigation. So on all their grapes, on all their, and I imagine in Croatia too, it's just not done. It's like, it seems so beyond our realm of what we think we can have, our entitled American way of being that, oh, well, we can just pump water there. In France and Croatia and all these places where lavender is native to, they do not allow irrigation. But in that native environment, where a plant is native, it's getting everything it needs. It's getting the sunshine there, it's getting the wind that it needs, and it's also getting the right amount of water, or it wouldn't be growing there. And their annual precipitation, as far as I was able to deduce from my own research, was that they get about 16 inches of rain a year, and that's ideal to the point where you wouldn't have to irrigate it, you wouldn't have to supplement. And here in Montana, we get 7 to 12. So I have to just, that's where that one time a month comes in. And then that meets that requirement of their ideal 16 inches of precip annually.
And as you know, I'm sure, because you do distill the lavender essential oil, is oftentimes when the plants are not overwatered, their phytochemicals are stronger. And I think they have,
Right.
so that's something to keep in mind too.
Yeah, not only for the essential oil content, but that also is what I think is part of the thing that dissuades the beasts from eating it. Is that oil content is just stronger in the plant. It's got its own root system seeking water instead of plumping it up with a bunch of false water. Not false, but supplemental water.
Now, lastly, just about the care of lavender, what about compost or fertilizer?
So again, this plant it runs lean. She is a lean runner. She attracts no bugs that would damage anything before you get it harvested. And it is such a lean, usually gets everything it needs from the soil. It likes sweet soils. So if you have acidic soils and you don't want to add anything acidic, so a lot of compost mulches and things like pine needles or whatever can degrade and add some acid to the soil in the vicinity. But the only thing I've ever, knowing what I know about it, and that is not it doesn't demand lots of nutrients. It's just a lean plant. It doesn't demand a lot of anything except cultivation if you're going to farm it in a serious manner. You can't just leave it for pretty sake out there. But it, and striving to be as organic as possible. I am not certified, and I am not a certified biodynamic farmer, but I live a seriously permaculture type lifestyle. So I really understand that I don't want to put chemicals in my land. I don't want it in my plants. I don't want it in my oil, any of the product. The only thing I've ever put on it is a certified organic, USDA organic fish emulsion as a foliar spray. And that is really effective, but because that adds this humidity to the plant, I only do that maybe every 2 years or so. I don't fertilize them. I don't, spray anything on them.
So it's really low maintenance for this plant.
Couldn't be easier. When people tell me they have trouble, I'm just like, what? It couldn't be easier. It's just an easy plant.
And how do you know? So we're going to be talking about some of the products that you make with lavender, but how do you know when it's ready to harvest, and what part of the plant do you actually harvest and use?
The technical way to tell is and the plant itself puts out a really woody shrub, this nice sort of dome-shaped woody shrub. And then from all of that wood grows the stem. And on Grosso, the stem is 24 to 26 inches long. So these plants, if you can imagine, and I have a few photos on one of my blogs, I think, where I'm sitting in front with my hands stretched out, and you're as tall as your wingspan. Is that how they measure birds anyway? But you're as tall as your arms are wide. So stretch your arms out, and I'm sitting in front of this plant, and I'm 5 feet too, and the plant has a good foot.
Wow.
beyond my arm reach. I mean, this Grosso plant is just a massive plant, and especially the more room you give it, the bigger it gets. But as it grows, and they mature at about age 4, and they really reach their peak in this cold climate between age 4 and 8. And they can live for 30 years. But as they grow, that woody shrub, in about the 3rd year, you're getting your most mature ends to that woody shrub. It'll get so big as the woody part, and each year it puts out a new stem when you harvest it. But that stem, if you cut it when you harvest it to about an inch of where that green stem meets the woody stem, and it's very easy to see it because it just looks like wood, and then the stems are all bright green. But I cut it to within an inch of the wood, so there's one little stubble of inch tall stubble all over the plant. And I try to cut them in a nice mound shape, because then when the snow falls on them in the winter, it doesn't split open the top. They kind of, all those branches hold each other up and keep too much moisture from seeping down inside, which can make them mold, and become shorter lived. And then, so you're left with these, like I'll get 10 bouquets on average from a mature Grosso plant. And those bouquets all have about 150 stems each. So you're looking at, and it has very little leafage, so not a lot of leaves on this particular variety, where the English have a lot of leaves. And sometimes all the leaves don't even produce a stem, so you'll just get a handful of leaves. Grosso is just like this beautiful. It's all stems and easy to cut. And you're left with these bouquets of about 150 stems each that are just stem and flower. And the best time to harvest them is when that flower, which opens from the bottom to the tip, is about 3/4, like 1/2 to 3/4 open.
Good to know. So you have to have the timing right. And then are you using for your products, because you do have value-added products that you're getting from the lavender, are you using the flower and the soft leaf?
Well, it all depends on who's buying, Jill. If, like chefs, I sell to a lot of chefs. I'll sell some just the stem, and they use it for smoking meat, and they'll put it right on the coals, and the stem is great for that. I have sold leaves, just the leaves from these English plants, to some really top-notch bakers in town, because they swear they want the leaf. The bud is technically what I sell. So on the flower, and I realized this when I first began drying these thousands and thousands of bouquets that would come up, is the flower itself. So you hang them upside down, and I began to realize maybe I should put a tarp under this, because the more I read, the more I realized what was falling out naturally while it was drying was technically the corolla, where the little flower petals are, and then they are set into the calyx, which is a little tubular piece, which often, and most often when you buy lavender buds, it is that calyx, the tube, which we call lavender buds, which is most often sold. So that little floret that falls out as the plant dries, I catch that on, nice clean catch tarps and bag it up. And I also sell that technically as culinary lavender, because it has a much finer, just taste and scent, and it's not quite as strong as the buds, but I do sell mostly the buds. And that's, to either people who are cooking with it, or mixologists, or ice cream makers. And then that's the bud is usually what I use in all of my sachets and, salves or whatever else I make with them.
That sounds wonderful, because lavender is so therapeutic, just the fragrance alone, right? I think, doesn't it have...
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just covered in aromatic oil glands, right?
Right. Like when you're out cutting it and you're like up to your armpits in it, it's just remarkable to be in that smell right up to your face and your eyeballs, for sure.
Great. So tell us a bit. You also distill lavender essential oil and make hydrosols from lavender. Can you tell us a bit about how you do that?
Well, I have had forever a little 10-gallon still. So it's like a 10-gallon barrel, and it sits on a really nice big propane burner. So with a 20-pound propane tank, it's completely mobile, and I often take it places and do demonstrations so people can understand, what is it that makes essential oil of lavender cost so much? When you see the process, you go, oh my God, it's a crazy thing that how involved it is and what it takes, let alone they don't even see the farming part of it and how you get it dried or fresh to get it in the still. But yeah, so this little 10-gallon still, which I ordered special from this crazy mad genius, Gary Stadler down in San Diego, he like makes every single part of this still, and he sort of has an innovative way that he puts the condenser together, but it makes it totally portable, and it's about a 4-hour process from set up to take down, and the oil all comes out through this process. It's a steam distillation. So you've got water in one can, you've got lavender in the can that nestles down in that one. That whole thing sits on a propane burner. You fire it up, and then you're boiling that water, which pushes the steam through the can with the plant in it that's just above it. It's all a sealed and enclosed container, and then all of that steam that is going through from the bottom all the way through all the plant material goes up into what the condenser is, which is cooling coils, like the copper coils. So it's like this big, huge chemistry set. That's what it is. And it's just fun. And every time I turn it on for somebody, and they're just fascinated by it. And it's a great demonstration tool, because it is so portable. But it takes, the lavender oil all comes back out of that condenser, but it comes along with the hydrosol. But by now, once it's starting to come through all those coils, so all that vapor goes up, and then it's condensed in the coils with a cold water jacket that I'm running from a spigot. So it's I got to have a water spigot to work with so I can cool the distillate. And once that cools it back down, then the vapor is being cooled back into a liquid. But by now, since it's been vaporized, it's separated the water that's run through the plant material and the oil out, but they come out at the same time. But the oil, and it all collects down in this beautiful glass blown receiver that Gary also makes. What's his business? Heart Magic Industries. Gosh, he's just a genius. But it comes out in this beautiful receiver, this glass thing, so you can kind of see everything that's going on. And in the first, I'll bet it doesn't take 35 minutes, all the oil that's coming out is coming out. And I can fit 20 to 30 of those 150 stem bouquets in this still. And then what comes out is about 5 or 6 ounces of oil.
Wow. So wow, that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tiny bottle of oil with a whole bunch of plant material. And at that same time, you've put about 4 gallons of water in the bottom of the first container, and you're getting about 3 gallons of hydrosol out of it, which is that water that the oil and water comes out together. So that's technically a hydrosol, which a lot of people don't understand. And a lot of times if you go to a store and you buy something, you look on the bottle and it's a hydrosol, or they call it a hydrosol, and it'll say shake well. What that means, if you have to shake a hydrosol that you buy in a store, you're not buying a hydrosol. You're buying distilled water that's had some lavender oil dropped in it.
Right. Because the hydrosol is much more, it contains the essence of the plant.
It's infused, exactly. It's imbued, it's infused, it's in the water. So it's like you can actually feel the water, and it'll feel sort of emollient and oily like when it's coming out of the still. And then, I put it in glass jars, and I've created a market for that too, which I talked to numerous huge farms, was on email when I first started this distilling part of the business, because I realized, my God, I get 5 minuscule ounces of oil and I have 3 gallons of hydrosol. What do I do with all the hydrosol? And I would call them and I'd say, you guys are distilling 1,000 gallons of lavender, in these huge New Zealand and French stills. And I'm like, what do? You must get gobs of hydrosol. And they're like, oh, we just pour it down the drain.
No.
And I'm like, what? I'm not doing that, because I'm a very efficient person anyway. Everything has to have a purpose in my life.
Yes, and hydrosols really are much more, if you look at it, it's from a waste perspective, eco-friendly than even the essential oil.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you get 3 gallons compared to 5 ounces. So, yeah, it was like, oh no, I am creating a market for this. So, I have literally, it is my passion. And I really encourage, refilling their bottles and stuff. So often people will find me at the markets that I do, and, they'll bring their bottle, and I always have a refill with me. So,
I'm a huge fan of hydrosols. I feel like essential oils are such a rage right now and are so overused. Um,
right.
I think the hydrosol is much more gentle and safer almost to use.
Yeah, it's a little less. And, some people have real sensitivity to direct oils, even though lavender is one of that and tea tree, they say, are some of the only ones you can use neat, like direct on your skin, and they don't cause any problems. And that is my experience. But a lot of people are just ultra sensitive to smell and to, skin conditions or whatever. So yeah, hydrosol is just this. And I'm curious, I've never really had it tested as to how much oil is in my hydrosol. I'm sure it varies differently. And this process that I do is fairly quick. It's pretty fast process where if I had more time, I could maybe run it on a lower heat and run colder water in the cooling jacket to extract more oil off of the hydrosol. So it's the cooling part that pulls the oil out from the whole distillate. So it's like, I'd be curious to see just how much percentage of oil is in the hydrosol comparatively, but you can still really smell it. So
They're lovely, and they're also known as floral water, right? Floral waters.
exactly. A lot of people are like, what is hydrosol? Why do you keep saying that word? Well, that's what it is.
And they're great too. I would think lavender, and I'd love to get into some of the ways to use lavender. I know it's super good for headaches
Oh
and
yeah.
insomnia. And can you tell us a bit about ways that you use? Let's start with the lavender essential oil, since you've spoken about that, and then hydrosols, and then we'll get into the plant itself.
Well, here's some of my favorite, and I use it all the time, of course, because I have it all the time. If you got it, you use it. And I use it for everything. And I'm known for, like, one of my taglines, or one of the things people know that I'm going to say is just put lavender on that. It doesn't even matter what it is, just put it on there. It's antimicrobial and antibacterial, and it kills staph infection and all of this stuff. It's great for MRSA, this new thing that's blown up in the hospitals. But my favorite things to use it for, and I learned this from a gentleman that worked at Young Living, the big, huge essential oil company. He said, if you're going to use it for sleep, and a lot of people do, and I try to turn people on to this because I thought it was very effective. He said, just take 3 drops or something and rub it into the soles of your feet. Because your feet have the largest capillary action in your whole body, you can move stuff into the bloodstream immediately. So rub it on your feet, and then you've got on your hands, cup it around your nose, take a couple deep breaths, and you will sleep like a baby.
It does help, especially for those nights if you're a little worried about something, just that smell of lavender.
Yeah, the concerns of stuff, it just calms that. It's really remarkable. And sometimes I think, oh, I have it around. I don't even need to use it. And then, so I don't. And then I'll just be, you like can't get to sleep, or you wake up all fretting in the morning about something or other. And just the last week or something, I just took a big deep breath of it, and I was just immediately calmed. It's really remarkable.
Hmm.
One of my favorite, well, any kind of skin wound, it can actually stop bleeding. Like, I pour lavender oil directly in a cut, and I've cut my hand often in harvesting the lavender with the little serrated edge. I have kept myself from going to get stitches because I couldn't afford stitches at the time. With putting lavender and tea tree and eucalyptus oil directly in the cut and wrapping it by day and keeping it open at night so it can breathe. I mean, so it's really a great cicatrizant, which is the word we use in the herbal world for wound healer. So it's perfect for that. And then my other favorite, which is my goal, is to try to get this in every chef's mise en place, every little place that a chef would have where they keep all of their most important things. I think every chef should have a bottle of lavender oil in their mise en place. because if you get burned and you put it on immediately and you continue to put it on, you will not blister. It takes the pain away, it takes the heat off. So anything that is a burn, like a blister, also, if you get blisters on your feet from a shoe or something, put lavender oil on it immediately and keep applying it. You'll feel, you'll get the burn, the initial heat, and you put it on immediately, and you'll notice right away that it takes the heat out. And then you'll notice, as with herbs, since they're so much more subtle than big pharma medicine, you will notice that you need to reapply it. It's not one big pill that's going to last for a month, You have to reapply herbs to have their effectiveness. And so you'll notice in this burn, and I mean, I burned the living daylights out of my thigh on my motorcycle pipe last summer, and just immediately put lavender oil on it. It didn't blister. This thing was close to a 3rd-degree burn. I mean, I stuck my leg right on that pipe. And it never blistered. And what I noticed, and I took a lot of notes because I'm like, I just want to see if I'm my best guinea pig. I mean, I tell people but I put the lavender oil, and you'll notice that the heat rises again. Like in 30 or 40 minutes, you'll feel it getting really hot again. You just reapply the lavender oil, and it'll do that for about 2 to 3 days. And maybe you put it on a little less. And a lot of times with herbs, they'll tell you, after the 3rd day, just give your body a rest. That magic medicine is in your system. Your body knows innately what to do with it because we're all connected with this planet, so that your body knows that medicine's in there and knows exactly what to do with it. And it's just miraculous that it helps a burn. And it's also, the hydrosol, I'll just say, is great for skunk sprayed dogs.
Oh, good to know.
Same thing, keep reapplying it because you'll smell it, just like that heat rises in a burn. You'll smell the skunk come back in about 30 minutes. I mean, your dog's not going to be happy, but you will be.
What? Now, I've also read too, emotionally, that lavender can be a mild antidepressant and just lift spirits. We talked a little bit about that, but do you have any experience with that?
Oh, yeah. I think lavender saved my life. Even after, and it was all, like I lost my first crop to a freak storm. And that's basically what my book has been written after, is what I've done differently since losing 90% of the crop. But I had backstock, and I still had, I had friends that were still farming it, and I would just put myself wherever lavender was so that, but I swear there is just, it's something about it that it can definitely bring you up out of doldrums. I really want to somehow tie into cancer therapy and maybe even PTSD people, just to try and see if exposure to the plant like I get, it's just that thing. It's like, I got this hit off of this plant, and I just think it can, well, Jill, it's just going to save the world.
Yeah. I know plants, I feel like the more you use them as medicine, the more your body, for me, in my case at least, I feel like it responds to smaller doses too. I don't think it has to be a really large dose.
Right, I agree with you. Like, what we were just talking about, how it gets in your body. And I mean, we've synthesized the living daylights out of all the medicine on the planet. Where did it all come from? It came from plants. That's where all the medicine came from. It's right here under our feet.
Yes, exactly, all around us. So, the essential oils, I've heard it called the first aid kit in a bottle, and it sounds like you've had a lot of experience with that. And I'm wondering too, hydrosols, do you use those for anything in particular? Is it more, I know it's really good for acne and your skin.
Right. Yeah, it's great. I see people, the young kids that got the acne all over their face, and I just want to go smear their faces or spray it. Like, oh, I can fix that. Put lavender on there. But yeah, it's great for that. And, I use it. I don't use antiperspirants because of all the chemicals and crap in them. But I'll spray that, or I'll wash down with it. Like, living off grid, you don't just jump in a bathtub or a shower in the middle of winter in the middle of Montana. You have to figure out ways. I'll wash my hair over the sink, and then I'll just soak a washcloth with hydrosol and rub it all over my body, and no one would know the difference. In fact, people say, "Oh, you don't look like you live off
Yeah.
grid." And I'm always like, "Thanks, I think."
Yeah.
But so I wash a lot with it, and then I also have to haul my water in the winter time because my well isn't quite winterized yet. So I use hydrosol for cleaning pretty much everything in my cabin. If I need to pull a dish off of the shelf and it's dusty or goopy from sitting over the cook stove or whatever, I'll just spray hydrosol on it, and it's got that oil base in it so that it's really good for grime like that. So, countertops and the sticky oils from our skin they get on your computer or your phone, stuff like that. It's fantastic. I've turned my yoga teacher, who's one of my best customers, on to spraying for its disinfectant properties on the yoga mats in her class.
Oh, that's great to know. Yeah, I've used it only on my face, spraying and in the air a little bit. I hate to waste it that way, but yes, that's good to know all those other uses of that.
My friend Crystal is an artist, and she turned me on to this beautiful, she's always working with solvents, and there's a lavender a solvent made out of this grosso type of lavender that she can use to cut her paints with and clean brushes with, and a lot less toxic than,
I haven't heard of that. For people who are listening and they have a lavender bush or shrub outside, and they don't have a still, and they're not going to be, maybe they aren't going to make their own essential oil or hydrosol. Do you ever make tea out of lavender or use it in any other way?
I did actually just this year start packaging it up in little tea bags in a nice little box. It's really cute, and I got the idea because there's a salon over in Bozeman about 3 hours east of me, and they were like, "Can we use your lavender for tea, our complimentary tea in our salon?" And I was like, "Well, that sounds kind of icky, but sure, whatever you want to do with it, because it's sort of a pungent herb." But that's what they started doing with it. And now all of these women in Bozeman they're very upset if I haven't sent lavender over there. And they're not drinking lavender while they're getting their nails done,
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm just going to package it and see if I can sell it. And it's really charming and sweet. And, it's come across my regular when I'm online researching. The London fog tea is a very hip thing to get right now, and it's like Earl Grey tea with a lot of steamed milk and sprinkled with lavender. So it's like, it's sort of a thing. But yeah, tea is great.
I add a little bit of lavender because, like you said, it is very pungent, but sometimes I'll just take a few little flowers or leaves and put them in the tea as a blend.
Yeah, and it's actually really nice when you don't go overboard with it. It's not just pure. I used to have a woman that would visit me at farmer's market. She would come every weekend, and she would buy another small ounce bag from me. And one time I just broke down. I says, "What are you using this for? Do you mind if I ask?" And she said, she opened the bag and she put a few buds in her mouth. And she said, "I don't know why, but I just feel like I need to eat it." And I said, "Well, that's great." She was
breath
like,
freshener.
exactly. And it's a great breath freshener because it's a mint family, but it's this beautiful florally mint. So I don't know if she was getting some mineral from it, like kids eat dirt. And that's exactly how she explained it to me. She said, "I don't know what it is. I just feel like I need to eat it right now, like kids eat dirt." I'm like, "Okay, great."
When I was researching lavender for this interview, I read in one of my gardening books about a reference from a book from 1633 called Garden of Health. And
Oh, cool.
that, I know, it was really interesting. And they had a quote from the book, and basically it listed 44 ills of flesh and spirit that can be cured by lavender, which I thought was
I
interesting.
love it. Oh my God, I have to get my hands on that.
Yeah,
That
I should
sounds
send you, I'll take a photo of it and send it to you. And
Oh, that'd be great.
it also said that in England, that they would take lavender sticks and then put desserts on them or pieces of fruit and serve them that way. I thought that's really interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
fascinating. Because I started making, so you have all these stems, and after sift all the buds off it, you're left with all these stems. So, of course, my efficient bent, I'm like, well, I have to find something to make with those. So now I've started to weave mats with the stems and like little coasters. And if you
Oh,
set a hot
wow.
cup of coffee on a lavender stick coaster, on the stem coaster, it actually smells lavendery. So it's kind of great.
What a good idea. So, Lori, do you have any other recipes or ways that you use lavender that you'd like to share with us today?
I do make a salve out of arnica, like a bruise salve. I call it my magic bruise salve because, and when I was reading about the effectiveness on lavender on skin stuff like you have, this gentleman, Gat Foss in France, was the one who discovered, and he'd heard about this from local, the folklore was that lavender was really good for skin stuff. And he got terribly burned in his chemistry lab and stuck his hand that he burned in the lavender oil. And so that folklore has sort of like come down through the ages. And the other thing that he discovered with lavender, which I think really I've found to be really true, and I put it in my salves for this reason, is that lavender seems to add, and he's quoted as having said this, a dynamism to spark the medicinal properties of other herbs. I decided that I wanted to use a local oil that we make around here, and I don't know if you would know it. I don't know if you'd have it out there. The poplar, the cottonwood that grows on all the riversides out here. It's very Montana springtime smell. And you can just infuse it with grapeseed oil. So I get this beautiful red cottonwood oil, and then I have the arnica oil from the flowers I've collected earlier in the spring, and then I combine those, and with the local beeswax I melt that all together to make a salve. And then once that's set up, I'll drop five or so drops in each container of lavender oil, and it just makes the most beautiful smelling salve. But it is miraculous on burns. And I don't know if it's even combining the cottonwood with the lavender or what it is, but it's really amazing.
Sounds marvelous. Oh my gosh, I want to smell it. I want to try
Send
it.
you some. I'll send you some.
Well, and for people who are listening and saying, oh my gosh, I want to try your hydrosols or essential oils, where can they find you online?
I have a brand spanking new website that's still got a few glitches in it, but you can sure see it, and you can't buy directly through there, but you can see what I've got just because I just call myself an artisanally batched farmer and producer. I don't have a whole lot of stuff made waiting to be sold. It's pretty much first come, first serve when I've got the lavender oil and it's in high demand. And that's how I just kind of like to run my business. But you can see it all on lavenderlori.com, and that's lavenderlori.com.
And you teach classes too, I know, workshops, and
Yes, yes.
and listeners should really know too, and I wanted to stress this, that you're actually doing all of this. You are making lavender coasters, salves, tinctures, distilling, growing lavender off grid, and that you live in a tiny house, very tiny. Is it 11 by 7, I think?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and 77 square feet. And tell us what it's like. What has it been like? And I know we're getting close to the end of our time with this interview, but tell us a bit about how that has really changed your life living in a small space and off the grid.
Well, it all came about because of the crop dying in this freak storm that we had, and then just running out of money and not having any lavender to sell. And I did purchase this piece of 20 acres in this beautiful valley and this cabin after my mother died, and it was what I had. So it ends up being my home sweet home, which I can't even describe to you how content I am there living with so very little. And it's just an amazing way to live, and it really gives you this perspective of just how entitled we all are in America. People will say to me, oh, I just jumped in the shower before I came. And I'm like, God, that sounds dreamy. Or I watch friends put their dishes in the dishwasher and I go, wow, how about that? Because I'm always asking people, can I do the dishes after dinner? And they're like, why would you do that? I'm like, so I can just turn that faucet on and that warm water can gush all over my hands. Come on, let me do the dishes.
And, listeners should know too, I think that one thing that really intrigued me about your story was that you really have you went against the odds in so many ways, growing lavender in Montana and living off grid and really growing organically and all these things that you're doing. And you also, didn't you learn to ride a motorcycle at age 50? That was great.
I did. I did. I was riding around on the back of a motorcycle with this boyfriend I had not too long after I got divorced and was having the time of my life. It was so much fun. And then when he and I broke up, I missed the motorcycle. So I went out and got my own motorcycle and took the rider safety course. And it was really, at age 50, was one of the most empowering things I've ever done.
This has been so lovely to chat.
It's been great to talk to you too. I'm glad we finally caught up.
I know. And your website is Lavender Lori, LORI.com. Thank you so much, Lori, for your time today.
You're welcome. Thanks for let's do it again, Jill. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to The Plant Report. The Plant Report is produced by Jill Cloutier and is a project of Sustainable World Radio. For more podcasts about plants, permaculture, and ecology, visit our website, sustainableworldradio.com, and you can also find us on iTunes, Facebook, and Twitter. The Plant Report is created for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any health condition. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to thank the plants for everything they do.